Okay, welcome to part 2. In this part, we are going to talk about the entity relationship diagram. Entity relationship diagram can be used when you want to model your database, and you have to basically do that before you want to implement it. ER diagram is like a blueprint. Remember, when you want to build a bridge, you need to have a blueprint before you can actually build it. Same thing happens here. You have to model your database before you can actually implement your database. So what is an ER diagram? The word for it is called entity relationship diagram. You know what's entity and what's relationship, so we just put them together. It's basically a visual way to represent the database. It can be represented in terms of rectangle and also lines. So the rectangles represent the entities and the lines represent the relationship between these connected entities. Okay, let's look at this. So this is basically, you have seen this in previous slides. So I told you like the rep has its own table, customer has its own table, item has its own table, and then these are basically those fields or attributes. So each table, basically you can show it in terms of the rectangle here, and why we have this rep number here. The rep number is basically the primary key, and we will talk more about what is a primary key in this chapter or in this class. So basically rep number, you put it here, the primary key is some unique identifier, and then you put the rest of the attributes here. And then remember, these are actually the relationship. So these lines show the relationship. And remember, we could have different type of relationship, one-to-one, one-to-many, and so on. We will actually draw ER diagrams in this course, and we are going to touch more on the ER diagram. So in this chapter, it's just kind of a understanding the terminologies and understand what these means in basic terms. So basically, we talked about what is a database management system also in chapter 0, but here is another review for you guys. So think about what is a database management system, or sometimes we just call it a database system. It's a program or collection of programs which users interact with the database. We have a lot of popular database management systems. The simplest one is Microsoft Access. Another one that's very popular, and you will use it in the intermediate database, is called MySQL. Also, a lot of people in the company's big organization, they use Oracle, DB2, as well as SQL Server. MySQL is open source. It's free to everybody. The rest of these, you have to basically buy and purchase them. So TAL Distributors, this company that we are going to focus on, they have decided that because they are not very big company, they are a small, medium-sized company, that they want to use Microsoft Access, and that's the simplest database management system that they want to use. So basically, we said another terminology is database design. So basically, in a database design phase, you are going to determine the structure of your database. So, and basically, you can actually use your ER diagrams and so on. So basically, you can either use a database management system directly, or you can use a database management system through another program. In this case, you can see that the database is connecting through the database management system, and then through the user, through the end user. And in here, you can see that there is a program that connects the database to the database management system. So our database sitting here, that database management system is actually interacting directly, this is the case that we are going to use. So in this case, we have another program, like for example, in the COP 3718, the intermediate database, we will be using this kind of a design. So basically, what is a form? Form is another terminology that you need to be familiar when we are talking about the database concepts. Basically, a screen object used to maintain, view, print data from a database. Database management system can create forms that basically the company needs. So in this class, you will also create forms and as well as reports. Reports is another terminology that you need to be familiar with. At Microsoft Access or any other database management system can create reports based on the user's needs. So for example, maybe in this TAL company, they want to know how many reps customers each rep served per month. So they can actually create a report out of the database to actually show the managers that results. Or maybe just in as if you are working with a university database, you might want to know how many students got GPA above 5, or list of the students who got GPA above 5. So then you will run a report and you will see the list of students who got GPA above 4. Or equal to 4. Okay, this is the form here. As you can see, this is done in Microsoft Access. So basically, the user inputs the information into the form. This is an order form, so the users can put this information in. And this is a report. So this is list of, for example, all the reps, or list of all orders that has been done for this month, or list of all the students who got GPA of 3.5 above or something. Another thing that we are going to talk about is, and we have talked about this in chapter 0, was advantages of using the database versus file approach. So basically, getting more information from the same amount of data is important when we are talking about databases. Sharing data in a database. So also, one of other advantages of database processing is sharing data. So the data from various users can actually be combined or shared among the authorized user. And this will allow all the users to have access to a greater pool of data. So basically, maybe several users could even have access to the data at the same time. And so a lot of more people can have actually get access to the data that they need. Another advantage of database processing is balancing conflicting requirements. So the database administrator is basically a person who is responsible to create the security, to create the groups in the database. So this person can actually be responsible for the whole database and actually can implement a structure that allow users to have access to the data. Also, another advantage of the database is controlling redundancy. So basically, you are not going to have multiple data, the same data in different locations. It's all going to be in one location, so you won't have a redundancy of data. Because, for example, if the data is in different location, like the file approach that we have talked about, you might have redundant data in different places. And also facilitating consistency is another advantage of data. So it can help with the consistency of data. For example, maybe somebody changed their address, like from 238 Fort York Boulevard to 235 Fort York Boulevard. So in that case, it will be changed across across everywhere. But if you have basically different files, then maybe you change it one place and then you will not change it in another place, so your data will not have that consistency. But with database approach, you will have that consistency of data. Another advantage of database is improving integrity of data. So a rule that data must follow in the database should be existed. So for example, maybe the rep number should start with certain character. And also maybe if a rep number is already existed, the database should not allow another rep number with the same number to be in that database. And another advantage of database is expanding security. Security basically preventing of unauthorized access to have access to the database. For example, a DBA can assign access to only certain users who need to have access to the data. So, and also maybe the DBA is responsible to making sure that those passwords that the users are using are strong, and also, provide certain rules for the password and so on. Also, another advantage of database processing is increased productivity. A good database is actually allowing the users to be able to access that data in the database without knowing too much programming. And so their productivity could be increased. And also it could have different features that allows the programmers to also use, so that they don't have to write a lot of codes as well. And finally, another advantage of database processing is providing data independence. Basically, a lot of databases can actually nowadays might need to change their structure based on the user requirements. So in that case, it is a good database and software can allow the structure to change without actually changing the data. So the data independence can change the structure without changing that program to access the database or any data that needs to be accessed to. Now let's look at some of the disadvantages of database processing. First, there is going to be larger file size, so you need to have more space. But nowadays, the disk space, it doesn't cost that much, so that's not a concern with a lot of organizations. Increased complexity, of course, you're going to have all these complex structure with entities, with relationships and with different attributes, so you could have thousands of tables in a huge database. Greater impact of failure. So for example, if your database crashes and if you don't have a backup, or if somebody hacks into your system, they could have access to a lot of different data. So there would be a greater impact of failure if you lose your data. And more difficult recovery, because it's a larger set of files. So you need to actually make sure that you follow a disaster recovery plan, and you have to actually make sure that your database is being backed up, and then you know how to recover your data. So this is going to be more challenging than if you just had files. Okay, now let's look at the second basically database that we are going to talk about in this course. So the first one was that TAL database. The second one is Colonial Adventure Tour database. Basically, they are a small business and they organize day-guided trips of New England. The management also decided to use a database to gather and store the information. So they wanted to keep the information about the guides, the trips, customers, and also reservation. So as you can see here, again, same as the TAL database, you can see that they have break it down into different tables. So this is the guide data that you can see with all these attributes, and they'll have these many records. Then you will have the trip, as you can see here. This is a sample trip data. This is a sample of customer data, and this is a sample of reservation data. Also, you can see the tables that are used to basically relate the trip with the guides together. And we will talk about how we can actually develop this structure when we are going further in these chapters. As we said, before we implement our database, we need to model our database. So as you can see here, they are using the ER diagram. So entity relationship diagram is combination of all these entities with relationship. The entities represent the rectangle, and then the lines represent the relationship. So you have a customer table, you have a trip table, you have a guide table, you have a reservation table, and you have a trip guide table that connects the trip to the guides. And as you can see, each of these tables, they have a primary key, which is a key identifier, which we will discuss more in details in other chapters. Another database that we will discuss in some part of this book is called the Solmaris Condominium Group database. Basically, this condominium group manages the condominium complex. They are actually located in Florida, and they have two locations, the Solmaris Ocean and then the Bates sites. Also, they provide kind of a maintenance services for the residents as well. They also want to use the database to store their data. So they will have different tables, as we have discussed in the other two cases. Location is one table, owner is another table, condo unit is another table that it holds the sample of the condo units data. And then the service category, because they want to also provide services, is another table. And then we have another table for actually the service request that they will get from different customers. So our database will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tables. And again, this is an ER diagram. So it is showing the entities and relationship. Remember, entities are rectangle, and then the relationship are those lines. So let's look at the summary of this chapter. One of the things that we have discussed that there is a problem with non-database approach is that you might get data redundancies. It could be difficult to access the data that you need. It could have limited security features. Also, it could have limited data sharing features, as well as the potential size of limitation. We talked about what is entity, what is relationship, and what is attribute. Entity is a person, place, object, event, or idea which you want to store and process data. Attribute, however, is a field or column which could be a characteristic of that entity. It could be like, for example, if entity is a student, attribute could be a student's name, a student ID, a student grade, and so on. Relationship is association between entities. Also, we talked about different types of relationship. One of them is one-to-many relationship, which means each occurrences of first entity is related to many occurrences of the second entity, and each occurrences of the second entity is related to only one occurrences of the first entity. Also, we have talked about database. What is a database management system? Is a structure that can store information about multiple types of entities, attributes, as well as relationships. We talked about the TAL distributors database, and we will talk about the data sets that we have. That the TAL distributor, they require information about the reps, customers, items, orders, and order lines. Also, we talked about what is a UR diagrams, which represent a database visually by using various symbols. So you will need to have this before you actually implement it. And then we talk about the database management system, which is a program which users interact with the database. It can let you create forms and represent quickly and easily and obtain answers to questions about the data. We talked about the advantages of database processing, getting more information from the same amount of data. The sharing of data could be another advantage. Balancing conflict requirements, because you have the database administrator who can actually administer the whole data. You have the controlling redundancies, facilitating consistencies. Also improving integrity of data, as well as expanding the security, so you can have like a strong passwords, and you can actually have a different access level to this database. And also increasing productivity and providing independence data independent. So in case you want to change the structure of your database, you can actually doing that without changing the program or the data. Also, we talked about disadvantages of database processing. Larger file size, it increases the complexity, it could have greater impact of failure, and also it could be more difficult to recover. We also talked about the other two databases that are in this book. One of them is Colonial Adventure Tour, which needs to store information about the guides, trips, customers, as well as reservation. And also we talked about the Solmaris Condominium Group, which needs to store information about the condo units, locations, owners, and also provide services. So you need to capture the service categories as well as service requests. I hope you have enjoyed this chapter, and I will discuss more about how to download that access file, and then also I have sent you an email about getting access to MSDNA so that you can download Microsoft Access, and that once you register with your USF username and with your USF email, you should be able to access the Microsoft 2013 as well as other Microsoft programs that are out there. Well, thank you and have a nice week. Bye-bye.